Hello, my name is Dr. Carl Candlepun, and in this special episode of my Lost podcast, I host a post-screening discussion of Season 1, Episode 4 of Lost, Walkabout. This discussion features no spoilers for any episodes past that point. However, if you have not seen at least that far into the show, I recommend you do so first before continuing with this podcast. Unfortunately, many of the regular discussion participants were not available to attend this week's screening. As such, the in-person discussion features only myself, our other veteran viewer, and one of our first-time viewers. However, I was also able to interview a couple of our missing participants and get some of their thoughts and opinions on this week's episode. But without further ado, let's begin. All right, so Will, you unfortunately were not able to attend last week's screening for Walkabout, but you did just text me and let me know that you have now watched it.
I have.
So I guess I'll just ask for your general thoughts to start with.
Well, first of all, as I said in my text to you, it was a big wow moment in that episode because I think it kind of destroyed everything that I had thought about Locke up until this point. Because you really were expecting him to be this bad guy villain, and then when everything transpired throughout the episode, I really even when they were going into the forest, I think in the first half of the episode, I still thought he was going to do something bad. But man, was there a twist there towards the end, especially the moment when that very last scene when you see him in the office with the excursion office and you realize he's in the wheelchair for the first time. And then it flashes back to the scene of him on the beach and you don't realize that that's the first time he's actually walked in 4 years, I guess is what he said when he was in the office. So incredible, just again, how like a traumatic event and emotion can change something and give somebody the strength to do something that they've never had before. So what a huge, crazy spin on that character that I did not see coming.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because that was what I wanted to ask too. Is like if you expected that at all, like if you caught any of the little clues that were sprinkled through.
Not really. I mean, I think I picked up on the foreshadowing throughout the episode itself when they were in the forest with the boars, especially the low angle shot of him laying on the ground, because it takes you back to the same low angle shot of him right after the plane crash, and you don't realize that that's tying all that back together. And how he's looking down at his feet and he's in that state in that moment and he's having that flashback to the office of basically telling his boss, no, I can do this. And so that whole thing was basically just setting up the big reveal moment that was coming later in the episode, which now looking back on it, I mean, man, what fantastic foreshadowing they did there.
Yeah, so I'm envious of people that get to watch it the way that you did because like I've probably told you this multiple times already, but I got into Lost about midway through season 1, and the person catching me up like kind of just was telling me things like, oh, and that guy, he was in a wheelchair until they crashed. So when I first saw this episode, I already knew that. So I never got to experience the like my mind's blown.
That's really unfortunate.
It's like trying to watch.
Man, that was really a hair raising moment. I was actually getting my oil changed in my car and I was watching this and I had my headphones in and I'm like, wow, that was like an incredibly emotional moment to be watching in the middle of the day, just in a room full of strangers. Cause I was like, I was sitting there was people around me. And I'm like, man, this is like a really good emotional scene where like you really, really feel bad for Locke and realize the challenges that he's been through. You know, obviously I want to know more of like what happened to him, what led to him being in the wheelchair. But even the way that they kept that so secretive until the very end of that episode, because even when they did all the sequence with him at his office, you never see him in the wheelchair in the office. He's sitting down in every scene, which again, you get it now because he's sitting down in every scene, but you never realize that he's in a wheelchair until that moment when they do that bigger reveal later on. And I was just blown away by that. I was like, wow. So I think everything that was going on, in the earlier episodes where he was helping the kid and all these things where we thought that maybe he was a bad guy, he was just the guy that realized he's just survived the biggest feat of his whole life. To him, this was probably a bigger hurdle than the actual paralysis that he had at some point, and so he was able to overcome that. So I can't imagine the emotions that he's going through after that plane crash, realizing one that he can walk again, and two that he didn't get to go on the big excursion in Australia, but his excursion has now turned into something way worse and way bigger scale than what he ever embarked on to begin with.
Yeah. Although, yeah, well, kind of seems like I don't know that he'd use the word worse. I think he might use the word more exciting.
For
He
him,
really wanted
probably
to go on
so,
that
actually,
walkabout.
because when you think about what he was wanting to do with the walkabout, I mean, this is to his point of what he was trained in, telling the guy in the office there, he's like, this is basically what I've been preparing for years. And, I'm putting everything aside to go do this. So yeah, you're right. Probably exciting is the more of the word for him, but still just, there's a challenge there too. It's exciting, but it's a huge challenge for him, I think, because, you think about somebody that was paralyzed that has now realized that they can walk again and having to quickly relearn that in the moment. I mean, and just everything that's come with that. But man, I don't know, that moment where I think that one of the other really defining moments that really foreshadowed what was coming was when he looked at Kate and goes, "You're not going to tell me what I can't do." Right there when he storms off to go after the hogs or whatever, because that was the moment again that you realize that there's some moment going on, even though we weren't really sure what it was exactly at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so man, yeah, there's so much you said there that to respond to.
Yeah, I had a
Well, so
lot
just
to
back
say
up for a
about this
second, like
episode, actually.
what?
So there was a ton to say about this episode because it just kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I was hoping like everybody would be able to come for it, because like I said, like I was telling you guys the week before, like this is tends to be the one that a lot of people are like, okay, I'm into the show, like I'm invested enough to continue and see where it goes, largely because of that twist. So what did you think of the Locke coming face to face with whatever this thing in the jungle is, and how that
Yeah,
turned out?
I can't imagine. He probably thought he was going to die. I'm sure. And obviously everyone thought he was going to die. And again, that moment again where it's like you just keep waiting. Like, are we ever going to see what it is? I don't know when we are, but I really want to know what the hell's out there. I'm like, man, this very spookified Jurassic Park is. I'm like, what's happening? I want to know what's in the jungle,
Yeah.
and everything that's going on there. But I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what I think about him coming face to face because you just don't know what it is still, and obviously it's not a wild boar, even though that's what he went hunting. But what is out there, I think, is still the big question of this, and when will we figure that out?
Yeah. Do you did you think it was interesting that when Michael asks if Locke got a look at this thing, when Locke says no, like did you have any thoughts about that?
I think that was a conscious choice because I think even though he saw it, he knows that what's going on the island's not good, and now he probably more than anyone really knows what's going on out there. And um, again, I think he's probably got a really big emotional battle going on in himself right now, trying to decide what to do with all that. And anyone that's got any knowledge of that, even though it's not the biggest secret in the world that there's something on the island, the ones that have seen it up until this point, they seem to be holding on to it as much as they can, at least the ones that are trying to keep the panic down. And I don't know. I think the him choosing not to say that was probably in the sense of not creating panic, because I think he knows what's going to ensue if they do figure out what's happening.
Okay. Did you? I mean, this is kind of a leading question, I guess, but the fact that the monster comes face to face with him, but doesn't kill him, because we know it killed the pilot. We know it's stomping, or it seems to be stomping around the jungle like it's pissed off or something. But
Yeah.
not only did it not hurt him, from what we can tell, uh, it also seems to have killed the boar for him. I don't know if you caught that, or maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't kill it for him, but it killed it, and then Locke comes out of the jungle with it.
Yeah, and maybe that's what it was. Maybe the boar ended up distracting. A couple of routes here. I'm going to go in two directions with this. So one direction would be that the boar disrupted whatever it was that was about to kill him, and maybe it killed the boar instead, and he was able to get the boar from it and run off. The second thing, though, I think is that maybe that's again where his supernatural enlightening thing, his religious enlightenment was going to happen, because he talked about that, and that was part of why he wanted to go on the journey when he was having the conversation with his Helen lady on the phone, which, by the way, that itself needs to be unpacked, but it was just really funny. But that whole moment there, I think maybe that was that spiritual enlightenment. And maybe there is something more going on there. Maybe there is some religious undertone. Maybe there is some spiritual thing that's happening on the island, and maybe that was his spiritual moment, and maybe he went through something really amazing there. And I don't know what happened. I don't. That one's really tough. But I think it could be a couple of directions. Either the monster got the boar before him, or something happened and he had some power over it, and maybe he does have some power over it. Maybe that's why he's choosing not to say anything to the others, is there's some connection that he has to whatever's happening there. But obviously it's hard to say at this point, because don't really know what the hell's happening there.
There's two more things that I want to ask you about. The first one, I think, is pretty short. Rose, the black woman that Jack goes and sits with, she shares with Jack her belief that her husband is still alive. Did you find that interesting?
I did find that interesting, but I just chalk that up to that she's still in shock. I mean, because we're only on day 4 of them being on the island. I personally, at this point, just think she's clearly in shock that her husband's probably gone, and in her mind, she's making it up that his part of the plane could have landed somewhere too, and it's not to say that it's not possible. And hell, it could, their part of the plane could be somewhere else on the island, but based on the way that the intro was set up and the trajectory, it's highly unlikely that the whole plane ended up on the island. His part's probably out in the middle of the ocean somewhere. So I think Rose is just really in a state of shock at this point, and I think he knows that, and kind of just lets her walk off for that reason, because she's going to have that realization eventually, but I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah. And the other thing, so pretty much right after that conversation, Jack sees something. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I again, that was another one of those where I was like, what is he seeing there? Because you see the figure over in the woods, but what is it? I mean, it's and is that whatever he saw, is that what helped Locke out of the woods, or out of the forest? Because that was all right before Locke actually came out of the forest and had the boar, I believe, if I'm sequencing that in the right order. So I think he sees that, and then there's nothing, and then they hear the rustling, and then he goes in the woods, and that's when they find Locke. So it was kind of like, all right, what's going on? Is there someone else out there? I mean, clearly, I think at this point we've established that there's either still something or someone on the island from whenever this initial broadcast was sent, and maybe they've been bunkered down in a bunker or something for a long time in survival mode, or or whatever he saw is completely supernatural, and that's what's helping out. That's what helped out Locke too. I think it could go either way at this point. It's either a real human on the island, or it's something completely supernatural. I mean, I could, thinking about that a little bit further, I guess you could look at that from a standpoint of, if you had been on that island for years, in survival mode, maybe in some sort of a bunker or something, I still wonder to this point if there's not like some kind of a research compound on this island somewhere, and that maybe at some point this island was being, maybe it was an archaeological find or something like that, where there was something going on and they stumbled into something they didn't mean to, but they had some kind of compound built where they were doing the research. And so it makes me wonder if there's still some of that research team on the island. And, if you look at it from the perspective of that, if you had been on that island for years and then a plane crashed on the island, and now you realize not only are you on the island, but now there's more helpless people on the island and still no help is coming. that's a weird spot to be in, because when you think about resources and how you're going to survive, and now there's more people that are going to have to survive, that could be the very reason why whoever that was that appeared at the edge of the forest was looking from a distance but doesn't want to come any closer, because whatever's happening out here is going to impede on whatever they have going on too. So there could be a whole different dynamic going just through that.
Yeah, yeah, true. Um, I'll point out something. This is not to say that there aren't ways around this, but just I'll point out a couple of things to consider. In that French transmission, according to what Shannon translates, and remember she doesn't speak that well of French, according to her.
Mm-hmm.
The transmission says that I'm alone now. It killed them all. So, and that's obviously a woman's voice. So, if that's accurate, if the translation's accurate, and that person is being honest, or doesn't have a misunderstanding of the situation, then it should have just been that woman left 16 years ago. So that's an interesting element to what you were saying. Again, it's not
That's
to say that
true.
you're wrong. Yeah, it's just an
Right.
interesting thing.
I don't know. Who knows, really? I mean, because, we hear that transmission and we think that, but maybe she thought everybody else was dead. And I
Exactly.
don't know, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe there was a character in their group that isn't actually dead yet, or maybe
Yeah.
someone came to rescue or something at some point and they ended up
Yeah.
on the island too. I mean, there's multiple ways that there could be another person out there in the
Yeah.
forest. So, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say, man.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's just that's why it's like it's better like in the group of like new, because it's tricky with me because I obviously know things, and so like it's not like I'm. It's more fun to like theorize with other people that also don't know
Yeah.
things, whereas I can't really provide that.
Yeah.
But
I do think too, just to add a couple of other small things, is that I really appreciated how they were setting up Locke's isolation through some of the scenes earlier in the episode, where you were seeing him in the office and then on the phone with Helen and all the things. I thought that did a really good job of setting up the isolation that he must have been living in, and I think that makes you understand why he had kind of latched on to the kid and some of the things that were happening in the first couple of episodes of that, where he's still kind of a loner in a sense, but he's trying to help and trying to do things and trying to get involved. But it seems like he's been let down by so many people, and so many people have shunned him because of his disability that he had, that he was just so used to that. I think that's kind of why he's been a loner up until this point. But this is probably the big breakthrough moment for him. And then I just loved the conversation with Helen on the phone and realizing that he had basically called one of the 1-900 numbers from back in the '90s, and was like having the conversation with what was probably a sex worker, a phone sex worker, more than likely, and he had turned her into a therapist. So I thought that was pretty funny, like how they set that up to where you realize that Helen wasn't even a real person; it was just somebody he was talking to on the phone. So
yeah, yeah, it's funny because like what Lucas was saying last week. I think it was Lucas. Like he had like the theory that well, he said multiple things, but yeah, like one of the things he was saying was that he thought that Locke probably had some kind of illness, terminal illness, and then
mm-hmm.
crashed on the island, and then believed he was cured, and then that was
Yep.
going to be like why he was like kind of radicalized, or yeah, he also thought that we were being misled that he was going to be a villain, but yeah, he was kind of close. I mean, the difference is that
He was.
yeah, we objectively know that he was somehow restored.
Yeah.
And yeah, it wasn't terminal illness, but
Yeah,
uh,
that whole thing is interesting to me, and I guess I want to understand more about like what was going on with why he couldn't walk. Was it an illness that caused it? Was it an accident? Was it like a temporary type paralysis? Like what was causing that? And you don't know. Could the jolt in the land of the plane crashing have done something to his body that unpinched a nerve or something like that allowed him to be able to walk again? You just don't really know what it was that contributed to that, so it's really hard to say. But man, did they do a good job of making what seemed like the bad guy all of a sudden a really good guy.
yeah.
In
Well,
the
I mean,
whole thing.
that's the interesting too. I mean, it definitely gets you to sympathize with him, but you could potentially argue that like this could still set him up for the type
Oh
of
yeah.
villain to become that type of villain
And
down
that
the
may
road.
very well be why so much of what happened in the forest is still a mystery at this point, because there's still a lot that could be happening out there and why he came out alive, and there really could be something there, and maybe he is still a villain in the gist of things. Maybe this was nothing more, to your point, than to set up the fact that everyone's going to feel sorry for him, because at the beginning of the episode, I asked first thing is, how did he get all these knives on the plane? He says he
Yeah,
checked them, but still, even you don't just check knives onto a plane. Of course, I guess this was the early 90s, so maybe this would have been before was this before or after 9/11? I'm
it was
trying to
after
think.
9/11. It was
It was.
2004. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think I have family members that have been in law enforcement, and I believe that. Well, I mean, it's different for them, I guess,
But I
but
think there
I
are ways you can do it. Yeah,
yeah.
you probably have to. There's additional paperwork and things that have to be filed. I mean, it's probably no different
Well,
than just
if it's stored with the luggage underneath the plane and you
yeah,
can't access it, then yeah, it's not
right,
really a
right. As
danger.
long as it's in an area that can't be accessed and all that. So,
Yeah,
but he did have a nice little arsenal of knives, which I thought was interesting for just someone who was going on a trip, that was going to go on an excursion. You would have expected an excursion to have stuff and equipment like that, not so much him. So it's almost like he had built up this arsenal, I guess, of what he was doing there. I don't know. It was interesting because I don't know, but the knife thing
yeah,
was interesting to me. I don't know why. I was really curious to why he had the big suitcase of knives, and was that really all for his Australian excursion? I mean, I guess it
yeah,
originally would have been since he was on the plane, but I'm like, what is he doing?
yeah. It is. That's an interesting point to bring up because it's like, while I do, I would imagine that they would have been expected to bring their own stuff or allowed to bring their own
Right.
stuff on this walkabout. It does seem a bit excessive the amount
A
that he
little,
brought,
and especially
but
if he had the true disability that he had and all of that at that point, I don't know. It was interesting, like why he would have had that arsenal of knives, and I would personally think, if you are in a wheelchair, you might want something a little more quick to react, guns, something like that. I don't know. It was just interesting, like what that whole thing there. So I don't know. Maybe there's absolutely good reason for all of it. It's just hard to say at this point. So I don't
yeah,
know. The knife thing was interesting to me.
yeah,
And maybe it's just I don't know, maybe it was just one of those things where he was a collector, because that was one of the things I thought too. Well, maybe he was just a collector of knives, and maybe his inability to walk, he started this collection because he had made up this whole like thing in his head that he was going to go do this excursion, all this was going to happen. Even the way that he was playing the game with the army men and everything with his coworker, I mean, and had made himself the colonel. All those
yeah,
things were as if he had fabricated this whole alter ego and in this whole story in his head of what he was and what
exactly.
this was going to be like. And so he seems like the person that probably would have gone and bought all these knives, and it was part of his
Yeah,
kernel arsenal, for this character he had made himself into, basically.
yeah. This identity that he's kind of created
Yeah.
for himself, or wants to believe. I mean, that's everything I've got. I mean, unless there's anything else you feel like.
I don't think so. It was a fun episode, all in all, just because that was such a huge plot twist, and it was really good backstory on him, because that was the one character that we were all like, what is going on with him? I want to know what his deal is. And we all said last week we didn't feel like we really got enough out of her backstory. We all wanted more from her backstory, but this one like
Right.
really dug in and like gave you some emotional roller coaster with him, and kind of like threw you into a whole new way of thinking about him. And that could be a good thing for all of us, or we could be in for another big surprise when he comes back as the big evil villain. Who knows? But
Mhm.
but either way, they did a really good job of shifting the focus on him a lot. So it'll be interesting to see where the next episode goes, and definitely like who the next character is that they put the focus on, because that's been kind of the neat part, is kind of seeing the backstories playing out now, and like how all the backstories are coming together in all this, how it's making them
Yeah,
do what they're doing. I still have so many questions about so many more backstories and what's going on with all that. So, and
yeah.
I'm
Is there anyone that you're
anxious.
like dying to know about the most now? Now that Locke's kind of been explored a bit.
I really like. I really want to know more about the doctor, the main guy. I just, like there has been some backstory and you get glimpses, but even in this episode, he mentioned to her that, I grew up in this. I haven't really had a choice. And I just want to know, like, kind of where he's at with all of this. And is he really the hero in all this, or is that all going to change at some point too? Because I think there's still a lot going on. And I want to believe he's the hero from the start of the show, but that could very well change too. Because even in this episode, the isolation that he did away from the group and the memorial and all that at the end, he's going through his own internal struggles too. And so I really want to learn more about what's going on with him as this relates to this thing. Maybe it's the pressure of taking on and basically being the leader of this massive catastrophe, but I'd like to know kind of like how he got thrown into all this, because you kind of get the inkling that while he's a doctor, that maybe he wasn't the best one before, and so maybe he's been forced into this now. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. 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 Um,
And then I want to see what happens with. I know that there's not really anything there, but I love what's the character's name, the blonde one.
Shannon
The Shannon.
or
I loved Shannon's moment with him where she sent him fishing today. I thought that was really funny. And I know that there's nothing between the two of them, but I just thought that whole scene was very quirky and awkward and fun, and that was very well done. So
yeah. I feel a little bad for Charlie at the end, and
yeah, I
I
did
knew.
too. Poor guy. He's just like he thought he got all excited, thought he had a chance with her, and she was just using the hell out of him. So, which
Yeah.
you get, that's pretty much her character, as Lucas said, the blonde bitch. So,
Yeah. Well, that's
so
what I was thinking. I was like, man, Lucas hated her already, like by the third episode, and I was like, I know that's not going to improve his opinion of her. So, Julia, you've just watched the episode Walkabout. Sorry, I'll just explain. I'll just explain real quick to anybody that's watching or listening to this. We were talking for a few minutes about the episode when I discovered that this site was not actually recording. So we're gonna kind of try and briefly recap what we already said, but I'll try and get it moving along. Basically, yeah, you were surprised by the twist in this
Yes, I
episode.
was surprised by the twist. I like. Well, I liked the at the beginning, the intro when they were doing the flashback. I liked the way that that was edited. I thought that was really cool looking.
Yeah,
And then and then I liked the twist with Locke.
yeah. Sucks because yeah, I really liked what we were saying, what you said about like the reveal at the end when it kind of goes back to the crash, and now you understand why he was looking at his foot and
Oh
getting
yeah,
up, and
yeah. It recontextualizes like the beginning of, well, both recontextualizes how he acted throughout the entire show so far, is like, oh, okay, so that's why he was acting that way. But then also, yeah, it does completely change. The ending changes the beginning scene from this episode, where you see his foot, and it's like, oh, his shoe fell off, and he's probably having post traumatic whatever. But then it's like, oh no, actually,
yeah,
he's like, oh, I can walk now.
yeah, yeah, and he's having this like profound moment while everybody's like screaming around him and horrified, but he's
Yeah, and
having a
there's like
very
a happy
different
music.
experience.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting to have that like miracle vibe in the middle of the crash.
Yeah, yeah. Locke having a completely different experience from what everybody else is experiencing, I think, is pretty apt. It's apt that it's happening from the moment he wakes up there, because from what we've seen so far, it seems to be his general vibe.
Yeah. Well, and the walkabout thing is interesting that he was like denied the opportunity to go on the walkabout in Australia, and now he's like on a forced walkabout where he doesn't have a choice. But like in a way, it's like this is exactly what he wanted.
Yeah, yeah. Now he gets the opportunity to prove himself the way he was trying to, and this identity that he seems to have like crafted for himself. He's pretending to be this colonel type character at work, and now he gets to really kind of try to embrace that role and get other people to see him that way. Yeah,
And they don't know
um,
his past. Yeah, that was so heavy and sad. That was, and
yeah.
the scene with Helen was just, oh, that was heartbreaking.
With what, Helen?
The
You
scene with
said,
Helen,
yeah,
like that was
yeah,
just so sad. It was so sad. I feel like I don't know if I would have thought of it as being common back then, but I feel like it's really common now where when you're talking to people, even just like friendships, a lot of people, like if you start talking about like stress or sadness or whatever, it's like, oh, well, you should probably talk to a therapist about that. And I feel like it really harms human connection. But then obviously,
Mm,
like, she's a paid person, so like it's a little bit different than that. But it made me think of that. Like there's a lot of ways where like human connection has become like a commodity that you have to pay for. Um,
hmm. Yeah.
and that was like really, yeah, that was just really sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like, were you so before it goes into his first flashback, like it shows him throw that knife and it shows he's got all these knives, and it's kind of like, God, who is this guy? He's such a badass. And then where you kind of just like, oh shit, like, nope. Like,
Yeah,
what was your?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's really interesting because he is one of the only characters that I do remember from like trailers and from like when I did try to, because I would occasionally like dip in and like try to watch it, but then I would like not understand what was going on, so I'd like be like, oh, I have to watch it from the beginning. So I
Yeah.
had seen a couple of things with Locke, and so I thought he was this like macho whatever. So I
Yeah.
just kind of assumed he actually was a colonel because he seemed like it in all of the flashes that I had seen. So yeah, so it
Yeah.
was like even like that made it like even more intense of a surprise because I already believed it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Um, well, and then he comes face to face with, they call it the monster, whatever's knocking down the trees. Um, any thoughts on that, and the fact that it didn't harm him in any way, as far as we can tell?
That's I was a little confused by that. So did he like I don't know if I missed it, but I didn't we didn't see the monster, right? Like we saw like the boar.
No, so the way that it plays out, and I keep pointing this out to people because it's something I didn't notice for a long time. And when you're not used to the sounds of the monster, you could maybe not catch the other sound that was happening there. But Locke's by himself. He's trying to get that boar. He's just outside the tree line. He hears it start to run, and so he starts to like move towards the tree line. And then you hear the sounds of the monster. Locke stops. You hear the boar like scream out and shriek, and then it's suddenly silenced. And Locke's kind of like standing there like, oh shit, and the trees start shaking, and then you get the POV shot from the monster's perspective of it like sticking out, and it's coming like
Oh.
face to face with him, and he's looking up at it like
Oh, I
oh
feel
shit.
bad I missed that clip somehow. I don't know. I'm
Oh,
really
okay.
tired, so maybe that's what it was.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah,
That also makes
basically,
more sense. The scream makes it make more sense that Kate thought he was dead. Because I was trying to figure out
yeah,
why
yeah.
she would jump to that conclusion so quickly. I was like, I mean, maybe not. Like,
Well, yeah. So she couldn't see. I do agree with you. I do still think it's kind of weird, a little bit weird, but like, because yeah, I don't
there's
think
no
she could
body.
see exactly what.
Like there was no body. Like she didn't know that for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. She knew the general area was in. She saw from a distance, like those trees being knocked down and stuff. And I don't know. I guess I was gonna say, I guess because of what happened to the pilot, but they got pretty close to it and managed to get away when that happened.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So like you
yeah,
would think that she would know that you should check first.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, yeah. So we leave Locke in that moment, and then yeah, the next time you see him, he's not
Got the
only fine, he's got the boar that again, if you catch it, you know that the monster killed. So, not only did it seem to just leave him alone, it let him take this boar that it killed. And so that kind of I don't know, maybe it makes you wonder like what is Locke's read on what happened there. I mean, what's your? I know you didn't quite catch it, I
Oh,
guess,
that's
but like,
interesting. So like yeah, so maybe like he would see the monster like more positively then. Like if he would like
mm,
if they killed the boar, then let him keep it.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe with what you were saying about the POV shot, like again, I like missed it, but like maybe it's supposed to represent like like some sort of connection between the two of them. Like maybe the monster could see something in him that made it not kill him.
okay. That would, yeah, that would suggest interesting things about the nature of what this thing is.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Yeah,
if it has some sort of like moral like judgment or something when it I don't know.
yeah,
We don't know what it is. I also
yeah.
liked that they finally like touched on the electricity thing about how the machine, like if it's been repeating the French woman stuff, that like there had to be electricity somewhere. I was like, okay, finally, yes, let's go.
I'm glad you brought that up because I totally would have forgotten about it now. But I've been wanting to talk to you about that. So because you're saying finally right now, but I'll remind you what I said at our Tabula Rasa screening. It's only the next day, and like from when you were like, why aren't they talking about it? And like, and what Saeed says in this episode when Kate sees the thing that he's making is he says it's too soon to talk about, and then she kind of persists in trying to get him to
Oh, that's a
explain
good
it.
point.
Yeah, and then he says, "Yeah, I'm trying to do this." So that kind of establishes not only has this probably been on Saeed's mind since he heard the transmission, but he's been keeping it to himself.
Yeah.
My guess is because he doesn't want to get anybody's hopes up until he knows for sure he can do it, because we know him and hope and not wanting to mess with people's hope. But uh, so yeah, like yeah, the thing you brought up last week or in the last screening was
Yeah,
yeah
it might
that
just feel like finally because like it's been a week for me.
right yeah. So yeah, that's the thing. Like sometimes you might go a couple episodes of where something like the plot point gets back to, and that's where you have to keep in mind that yeah, the time's passing at a slower rate for them in the show. but
Yeah. No, it's
but
okay.
yeah,
Well, and it doesn't like that stuff like that doesn't really bother me like that
yeah,
much.
yeah. Um, but going back to Locke for a second, so now, so when he tells Michael at the end that he didn't see the monster, so you didn't really catch that was a lie, I guess.
No, I didn't catch that. Yeah, because I don't know how I missed that either because I was really watching at that point. Um, I had one point where I almost fell asleep, but that was not when it happened. So I don't know.
Okay. It
Just
wasn't.
because of the information, not because of the show.
Gotcha. Yeah. It wasn't because maybe I messaged you at that point.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Maybe that's what
Yeah.
it was.
Sorry.
Or it could have been when I was checking in, like, I'm almost done. Like, 'cause
Yeah. Gotcha.
it sounds like
Um,
the kind of thing like it could have just been that I like looked away for a minute and then it was happening while it was not.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, trying to keep moving along because I know you're tired. So um, Jack sits with Rose on the beach and gets her. She ends up
Mhm.
saying something about her husband. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, like first like the conversation that they had at first was really like this. It was really sweet when she was like, I'm letting you off the hook. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
stay with me the whole time. Like that was like
Yeah.
sweet. And then the like talking about how people are in post traumatic stress shock or whatever. Like that was a fun conversation. Yeah, and then she says the thing about how like the tail is still like that she thinks this tail is still out there and that they also think. And then he saw the guy
Mhm.
in the suit, which
Yeah.
felt very like that felt very David Lynch. Like I was like,
Yeah.
this feels like Holland Drive or Twin Peaks, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which I'm sure was deliberate because like people know David Lynch's stuff, so it was like okay, but
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting because they did do it weirdly enough that it could totally have been a hallucination on Jack's part, and it also could be real.
Yeah. Yeah. Which yeah, but I mean that's the thing though is I guess setting aside whether or not what Jack was seeing was real, like prior to that moment, like were you kind of buying into Rose's theory about the tail section and her husband, or do you think that might
I
have
had
been time?
wondered about before about where the tail fell and if they saw it fall or not. So I was a little bit like, okay, that could be a thing. And the island is pretty big, so it totally makes sense that it could have fallen to somewhere. But it also could be a post traumatic like reaction where she just like can't accept him being gone. And it
Yeah,
also makes more sense of her like sitting there staring, like she wasn't like mourning him, she wasn't just in shock, she just was waiting for him, which is a
yeah,
weird.
that's the way to read it. I think one way that I read it, and this is all subjective, so this isn't any more right than your interpretation of it. But like, I almost feel like she's so sure of what she says to Jack at that by that point. I almost feel like her sitting there, that was her trying to figure out what she believed. Like, am I in denial about this, or like, do I have this real sense, this real conviction that that he's out there? I don't know. That is my take on it. She's trying to
No,
figure it out for herself.
absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
I think like depending on how connected people are, like there are stories of people just knowing someone's not dead and knowing like just having like a feeling. And it's scary when you're like you have this gut feeling that everyone's like, well, like obviously it's not real, but like you feel like you're just something tells me that it is there, like in um or it is whatever the thing is. Um and so it totally makes sense that maybe she needed to be like separated to just kind of process that and be like, what I feel like, am I losing my mind? Am I, um, yeah. I also had a moment where I was like, when the guy showed up, there was a part of me that was like, what if she could have heard things? Like, what if she like actually knows that the tail is out there somewhere because she just like because subconsciously or not, maybe like knows that it's there. I don't think that that's actually the case, but just like I had a moment where I was like, I wonder.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And also, she could just be like, because she could have just been like looking for him, like looking around to see is the tail there? Is the tail there? Is there any like, have I seen any debris in the water? Like, because I assumed that the tail had fallen in the water, and that's why they were sure everyone was dead. Um,
Mhm.
so if she was watching the water for pieces to see like, if that was what had happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Confirm or deny what she thought.
Right. Makes sense. Um, so other than maybe somebody from the tail section, do you have any thoughts on what the dude in the suits deal might be? Well, I think you
Uh,
also said it could be a hallucination, but
yeah, I was thinking it could be like a hallucination, like something from like Jack's history, like, and well, actually, yeah, and you had the whole thing about how he came into the doctor thing, like by family, so it could be foreshadowing. They could be saying that, um, maybe the next episode because they, like the last episode, Locke's face looking off into the distance was the like, um hint of what the next episode was about. So maybe Jack and the like guy in the suit is a hint that like maybe Jack is next episode. If the guy in the
um,
suit is like Jack's dad or something.
Jack's dad, you said?
Yeah, I could see it being his dad. Like maybe his dad died and it's like a flash, whatever. Because it
Unless you
happened
think
like when
he's
Rose said that the tail would still be there. It was like the clinging to the loss of someone. Like it could have triggered Jack into having a. But I think I'm probably wrong considering that you're like, hmm.
this. The funny thing, I mean, this is me just trying to have a blank face. I'm not trying to give away if you're right or wrong at all. So that's what my attempt at a blank face looks like, I guess. Just went,
Hmm.
Um, was there anything else in this episode that you had thoughts
Yeah,
on that you?
the Boone's sister, I thought that the way they handled her was like kind of fun. And there was a conversation with Boone about Rose where he was like, which
Oh,
I really wanted him to just go talk to her.
yeah. It's funny because it's like I feel like so far Boone has like consistently tried to do things that maybe he's not the most qualified for, like trying to give her CPR when they first crashed, and then trying to take the gun when everybody was sleeping so that he could stand guard. Like he seems to have this character trait where he like so badly wants to be seen as the protector or a leader or something along those lines, a hero maybe. Um, so it is interesting that in this particular instance, like yeah, he didn't take the initiative to go over there, and instead he went to Jack. Um,
Yeah. Now that you say that, that's kind of a funny thing to watch with like with it being Ian Somerhalder because
mhm.
like I am always in the process of watching clips of Vampire Diaries. So like he is very much the I mean he like can be he's bad sometimes but like he's very much the protector. Like he always knows what to do. He always knows how to fix a situation. So it's like
Yeah.
funny to see him be like, "Oh, I'm just not sure." It's like, okay, since like most people hadn't watched 8 seasons of The Vampire Diaries before they watched Lost because it didn't exist
Right.
yet.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What any thoughts you'd like to share before I start asking specific questions? Or you could start with your favorite character, Shannon, if you wanted.
Oh, that bitch needs to leave Mary alone. Mary
Yeah.
fought on Pelennor Fields. She needs to give him some fucking respect. He's not some rich trust fund baby, plaything. I grow to hate her more every day. It is her eventual demise is the only reason I'm still kicking and going in life, basically. So I think that's how I would summarize my feelings about Shannon.
Okay. Yeah, I do. The way you were hating on her the last time, I was like, oh man, like after this episode, it's gonna get worse. You said Locke is not the incel protagonist we asked for, but he's the one we needed. Well, so yeah, that's a good transition too. So like, you had your theory about Locke being kind of a misdirect as far as being built as a villain. Um, where are you at with him now? Now that you know a little bit more about him, like, do you still think that's? I mean, do you think it has been confirmed as a misdirect, or do you think it might still go that way? Are they going to still kind of make him a red herring
Look,
villain?
I believe when there's any indication you might be right, it is fully justified to assume you're completely right and just run with that narrative. So I was right on him being a red herring. I don't care what he does in the future. In my heart, he is my incel boy. He is my lad. So I don't care how many children he throws in the shredder. It doesn't change the fact that he's the sad little cripple boy who is lonely and wants to be a big strong man.
Yeah.
So
Fair enough. Fair enough. But but it sounds like you're on his side now. So like you like him after this episode. It sounds like.
he's my favorite character now. He's the most interesting. My favorite scene was that super depressing call with the sex phone operator. It's
Yeah.
like, oh no, dude. Oh no.
It's funny hearing everybody's reaction to that. Yeah.
He's the
No. Yeah.
most nuanced of the characters so far. So he's
Yeah.
my favorite. It could be replaced by the blonde hunk as he gets more humanized as time goes along.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so, I mean, this was only the second full flashback episode that we've had, and yeah, I think everybody last week, including me, like agreed, like that one kind of left you wanting in the flashback department. Like you didn't really get to learn anything that new about Kate. Um, Whereas this one, obviously, you learn a lot, but I mean, there's still you're not sure which direction it's going to go. There's still questions about his past that you might be asking. Um, yeah, all that's to say, this is really the first. We're still in the early run, and this is the first time that they've really added layers to a character. I feel like, so I feel like what you're feeling with Locke right now may happen with more characters as we continue forward. Um,
I would hope so. I
yeah,
hope the characters get more nuanced and interesting and not less nuanced and less interesting. That would be
yeah,
a very depressing direction.
yeah, yeah. Um, because last week, I keep saying last week, but at the last screening that you attended, um, you said like another theory that you had about Locke was that he had a terminal illness of some kind, and now for some reason he believes that he's been cured, and that's why he's like having these feelings about their situation, talking about miracles. You were very much on the right track, obviously, but the difference is it wasn't exactly a terminal illness, and we objectively know that he was somehow healed or restored. Um, but yeah, I wanted to ask basically, like, were you surprised when the reveal happened, or did you kind of sense that something like that was going on?
I knew that was the case from the very first scene of the episode where he's looking at his toes. I was like, it wasn't like cancer or terminal illness. He's a cripple. Damn it, I got it wrong. And then they were very deliberately not showing him from the waist down. I thought that was pretty telling. So I think it was really kind of obviously telegraphed that he was a cripple before they finally revealed it. But I feel like the way in which it was shot and done was fine. I don't think it detracted that. I mean, you knew it was coming. I don't think that's a big issue. I still enjoyed the episode quite a bit. It's one of my favorite episodes so far.
When I first saw this episode, I knew beforehand that Locke had been in a wheelchair. So it's always been interesting to me to watch it with other people and like see if they find it obvious or not. I will say most people don't catch on to it, and some of the people I've talked to so far. Well, so Drew, the one that hadn't seen it before, he he thought like there might be like a gimp leg type situation. So he also picked up on some of the clues, but he didn't go full wheelchair. But I just got done talking to Will, and he didn't see it coming at all. And that does tend to be more often the case with the people that I've watched it with or talked to after they've watched it. But yeah, it's because it's always seemed obvious to me because I've known and I see the clues. But I think like the first scene, it's meant to be he's looking at his foot because it's like, oh, where's my shoe? Like that's how you're like almost meant to read it at first before you understand by the end.
That didn't even occur to me that he was looking for his shoe. I was like, oh
Yeah.
no, he can't walk. He's wiggling his toes.
So I mean, you caught some more of the clues than I would assume, like where the supervisors kind of like oh, you're supposed to go around hunting and gathering on foot, like that didn't go over your head. I'm guessing.
just his office guy just being such an asshole to him. It's like, okay, so either he's famously in the office a pansy, a wannabe, and this guy's just a big asshole about it, or there's some physical component to it. So
yeah. I imagine both of those things.
Well done.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll move on to the next thing, which is Locke comes face to face with whatever this thing is in the jungle, and even though it's killed the pilot, it left him alone. It also killed the boar. I don't know if you caught that. So not only did it not hurt Locke, but it seems to have let him take the boar. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
I remember my last comment now.
Yeah.
Him being asked about it and just like saying nothing is just like, oh my goodness, this is like an old Republican who saw his grandson vaping and is just like very upset about it, but doesn't want to talk about it. And it's just like, I mean, I don't think he's evil. Locke is. I just think he's like, yeah, no one's gonna understand. Let's just move on. We'll address this some other time. I'm still going with the fact that I can wiggle my toes, and I killed a boar, which now you're telling me the monster did it for him.
Well, that's the question, right? Like, did it do it for him, or did something else happen there? Because like the way that you can figure out that happened is like Locke's by himself. He hears the boar. He hears it start to run, and so he starts to like go towards the tree line, and then you hear the monster. And then in that sound, you hear the boar scream out and shriek, and then it suddenly stops. And so like that's what clues you into the fact that the monster killed the boar in that moment before it comes and looks at Locke. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily mean that it killed the boar for Locke, but it's interesting that it killed the boar for whatever reason, and then it just let Locke take it. It seems noteworthy. And then maybe
that's all assuming that the monster realized Locke was there.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
I
maybe it
don't
didn't
notice every ant that's on the ground as I'm going along. So, like, if this is some big boy moving about,
Oh,
I mean, the boards being loud and squealing and stuff, I could see it, like, killing that, like, swatting a fly that's, like, buzzing in your ear. But you wouldn't, that if it's not annoying you, you might not notice it. So I feel like if anything, the most likely outcome is just Locke got lucky and it didn't notice him.
okay. Gotcha.
Maybe Locke is in on whatever the hell's going on. I think that's unlikely, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, so playing devil's advocate there again. I'm not. This is not me saying that you're wrong, but just kind of pushing back on some things you said there about it not noticing him. It did kill the pilot. The pilot was not doing anything, as far as we could tell, I guess, to draw attention to himself. He just stuck his head out. And that POV shot from the monster's POV seemed like it was just like coming and looking straight at Locke. Again, that's not me telling you you're wrong. I'm just pushing back, giving you more things to think about.
All right, but if I'm remembering the plane correctly, it was kind of fucking around with the plane. So it was like a kid playing with a toy, and suddenly a spider jumps, pops its head out, and it's just like, oh no, you kill that. I'm just thinking, like, dude, if this thing is looking at it like an ad, you might look at this and it's like, I'll come back for that.
So Jack goes and sits with Rose on the beach, and then at the end of that, she kind of reveals to Jack her belief about her husband still being alive. Any thoughts on that?
Nah, I think they did.
Yeah. Okay. That's what Will
I
said too.
mean, I think they're dead. That's wishful thinking. I mean, I saw that guy get sucked out the back of the airplane. I don't think he's kicking. Now maybe everyone's dead, and if that was the case, well, I mean, maybe they're in heaven and this is hell. I mean, who knows?
Okay.
Her husband seems like a nice guy. Maybe she's evil and we just don't know it yet. Like,
Yeah. True. She could be a serial killer, for all we know. Okay, and then immediately after that, Jack sees something, and then he sees it again just before Locke comes out of the jungle. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know. My guess was maybe like his dad or something. He said he just not necessarily that he's a good person. It's just part of the family business. So maybe he has some parental expectation, like hang-ups that maybe something with the island is starting to like manifest, that sort of thing. So that would be my shot in the dark. Is maybe it's like representing or it's his dad or something like that. Some parental figure that he has a troubled history with.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, Will kind of thought like it could be related to the French signal, or just some other group of people or something like that. Do you not think that's likely?
I feel like Jack's reaction would have been different if it was a stranger. It felt like someone that he knew, and that it seemed more like he thought he was losing it rather than there was an actual person. So that makes me think that there's some sort of personal history that's not just because if there was just some other survivor, I think he would just start like yelling out, and I think the tone and how he was behaving would be much different.
That's a good point. I don't know that I ever thought about it, but like, yeah, like if it was just some random person coming out of the jungle, like why wouldn't he be like, hey, there was somebody over there?
It seems to me that he's not telling the other people about it because he thinks he's losing it, or that's someone that couldn't possibly be here.
Right.
which means it's someone he knows in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Look, I'm ready to be completely wrong, but like, if it's his dad, I'm going to be so. But okay, it's not going to be his dad. It's going to be his uncle that diddled him. Like, I'm going to be almost right, but like wrong on the particulars. It's going to be Locke being a cripple all over again.
Yeah. I will say, if you're 2 for 2 like that, back-to-back episodes this early on, maybe I'm going to start getting suspicious that that you've seen some stuff and that you're remembering things.
Okay. How many things have I said are going to be wrong though? Like 90%, I'm sure. If it's his uncle and he got diddled by his uncle and that's why his reaction is, I mean, that's a shot in the dark. If I got bullseye with that, oh baby, I'm the prophet.
Well, all right. Oh, did you notice that guy's shoes? The guy in the suit.
I don't remember anything special about his shoes. Was he not wearing shoes, or were they just?
So he's wearing a suit, obviously, and then he's wearing white tennis shoes. That's the noteworthy thing. Most people don't catch it. You only see the shoes the second time Jack sees him when he goes into the jungle. But most people don't catch it in that episode, which I guess is a spoiler that you see him again. But it'd be weird if you didn't, right? I think that's all I've got, unless you have anything that I haven't asked about that you feel like expressing. Okay, so we've just finished watching Walkabout. We have quite a few less people, about half the people that came last week, which is disappointing, especially for this episode. But all of them said they're going to watch it separately, and then they'll be back next week. So that's good. Silver lining is Drew. He's the only one here that hasn't seen it before. So we'll kind of get to focus in on his thoughts as the one first-time viewer and get his perspective specifically. No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the obvious question. Did you expect him? Did you see that coming at all for you in the wheelchair?
So I knew something was up because, you start the episode and he's immediately like fidgeting with his foot. Mm-hmm. And then after the first boar attack, checks immediately on his foot. Mm-hmm. So I didn't go full wheelchair. I was like, maybe it's like a bum leg. Yeah. And then it's only after you see him in the wheelchair, like, that's right. Like, he was always stationary in every shot we saw him up until
the machine by the bed.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah. What was that thing? So at first I thought, is he talking to a person like a ham radio?
No.
But no, that's not the case at all.
He turns it off. Basically, it's a machine that stimulates the muscles and stuff so they don't atrophy.
That's good to know, because when he stood up there at the end, I was like, he shook off 4 years of atrophy really easy.
Well, although, I mean, that's the thing, though. Like, even if they hadn't explained that with the thing, is like, well, I mean, let's assume it was a spinal injury. I feel like that's what that would be. The fact that apparently is all better, it wouldn't be much more of a leap to say that the atrophy just also miraculously was cured or whatever. Well, so yeah, so let me back, because last week I started by asking any criticisms or what people thought of it. What did you think?
At the end of last week, Locke so far was my most favorite character.
Yeah.
Because he has the most mystery behind him, and like this episode answered a lot of things, but at the same time left a lot of things open. Like, whatever he saw, why is he saying he didn't see it?
Right.
Like, there's got to be a reason for it. And then, like, I thought when the episode first started, I thought they were going to start developing like a schism, because like people are really going towards, I'm going to blank on his name, the doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, like treating him like the leader. Mm-hmm. And then you have Locke, who kind of establishes himself as like the survivalist know-it-all guy. And so then I was like, you just can't help but just wonder, like, is this what's going to happen? It's like, are they going to start factioning off? Mm-hmm. Type of things, because he brought back the board. Like, he's the provider, and then Jack is starting to alienate people by not being interested in like the more emotional side of things. Although it seems like there's going to be more to that too.
But okay, yes. Yeah, so like I said, I was worried that I hyped it up too much. I was like, oh, well, most people get hooked around the 4th episode. The reason is because people are like, what? Like, he was in a fucking wheelchair? But I feel like because of like me not wanting to give away why people got hooked, like I feel like people kind of started to expect other things from the episode, like you were saying, like the plot like starting in some kind of new way, which I don't feel like necessarily happened. It's just more kind of establishing what them trying to survive. And the dynamics.
Right. Well, I mean, they did establish though the guy in the suit now.
What does that mean, though?
No, I have no idea, but like they don't just show you that for nothing.
Well, so did you notice that guy's shoes?
Yeah, like they were like bright white, which made me think like nurses' shoes or like something like that.
Any thoughts or theories on who that could be or what that might mean?
I mean, the obvious, at least to me, what seems obvious is he's imagining it. Again, that'd be a bummer. The other side of it is he like we know that someone was on the island or probably on the island shooting that signal. Like it goes back to that theory of like, is there a faction somewhere, people that have been there for years, and like if so, like I don't know how he disappeared, trapdoors or something. I don't know, but like, but that leads to like, oh, is the imagination? But if not, like the route he took, he would have run into Locke.
Well, to be fair, and I'm playing devil's advocate here because I'm not even.
But I'm trying to logic.
Yeah, Jack sees him go into the woods, and then he goes into the same spot in the woods, and then Locke comes out from this direction. Assuming the guy was actually there, like you said, he could have been imagining it. Then maybe he forked off that way or whatever. So playing devil's advocate, I do think it would be believable if he were real that he would have crossed that. But
if you get lost in the jungle.
But if he is real, that raises the whole thing. Like, what the fuck is he doing? Just oh yeah, the foreshadow. So in the last week's episode, do you remember when Charlie was helping Claire lift some things, and they were using like the wheelchair?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Well, hey, look on the bright side. At least whoever this was is better off than we are."
That's got to be something you can only appreciate on a rewatch.
There's so much. There's so much stuff you've already seen that sort of like that twist recontextualizes things from earlier in the episode. It recontextualizes what he was saying to Walt, just his whole reaction to being there. There are other twists to come. A lot of them character related, because you're going to start getting to know these people they've already like thrown shit in your face that like. First watch, it goes over pretty much everybody's head. Also, in last week's episode, you remember something was chasing Michael, and then he ran out and ran into the Korean lady. 4. There you go. we talked about that last week.
I gotta say, the war won. They got him, and they got him. Only did one day.
Yeah. It's another reason. It's like there were so many things that were said last week that I was like so looking forward to being like,
there you go.
Yeah, see, I told you find out soon what animal it was. The other thing was, remember they were talking about how, like, why is nobody trying to figure out where that signal's coming from? It must be, like, a power source. It was like, it's like literally the next episode. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, that was also funny, because last week, Lucas, just railing on, I'm blanking on her name.
Blonde bitch.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say it, but yeah. And then, like, this episode, it's like, still not a very likable character. You're like, okay, so she's working things to her advantage.
But in a very unlikable way.
Right, in a very unlikable way.
I feel like Lucas's opinion would get lower, if anything, when he sees this episode. Yeah. Did you get sad for Charlie?
A little bit.
Yeah. Charlie. That reminds me. That was why I was excited that you did show up, is because you said that the bald guy with the scarf was already your favorite. Same, more or less.
I think so. His backstory to me was, kind of sad.
It was very, yeah.
And I got a really heavy taxi driver. Who's a taxi driver?
I have not, strangely enough.
Which is very much like a very normal guy who has delusions of grandeur.
Yeah. Yep.
And then he had kind of achieves it in this sense on the show now that he's got his legs back.
Yeah.
But like I said, what keeps him interesting is he saw them he had to have seen whatever was there. It's why did he keep it quiet?
Yeah. And potential ideas on why he might have?
I mean, the only reason I could think is one is because there's always power in withholding information. And then I think you said last week, you kind of mentioned the idea of like people who like see things as miracles. So does he kind of like twist this into sort of a much more mythical religious kind of thing, knowing that like he's been cured,
Right.
and like all that? Does that viewpoint just kind of skew his thought process? Craziest ideas has something to do with the guy in the black suit, like he knows him already, but I don't think that's the case. Or not that he knows him already, but like he ran into him in the woods, and he kind of cued in a little bit.
Okay.
I don't think that's it, but
And like maybe the guy in the suit told him to be quiet.
like just explained a couple things to him, type of thing. But given like him staring up at the sky and the noises we were hearing, I don't think that's the case.
Like you were just talking about him potentially projecting meaning onto that, like I was talking about last week. But I mean, it does seem strange, potentially, that this thing that we know killed the pilot came face to face with Locke and then didn't do anything. Like,
It probably does mean something, doesn't it?
yeah.
It's got to be something.
Yeah. Did you catch that it killed the boar?
I did not catch that.
Yeah. So I didn't either until I've probably seen it.
I didn't realize that until you just said it.
See?
Because he was all bloody, I assumed he got into a fight with it or something.
Well, I see. My theory for that is that he was trying to carry it or something. But was
the boar there on the ground or something? Or?
So Locke's out there by himself trying to find this thing. He hears it and he starts to like move forward, and then that's when you hear the monster and you hear the boar scream out, and then it goes silent.
Okay. Well, the noise it makes, or what I think it makes, I don't even know if it was that, or if it's the score making that really screechy, like digital screechy noise. I don't know if that was the soundtrack or the actual monster making that. So
Yeah.
and it could be I just didn't hear the boar over whatever that noise is.
Right. Yeah. The other part that I think is meant to clue you into the fact that he didn't kill it is when Michael at the end tells him, "Hey, good job." You know what? And he's like, "Yeah." Well, he's kind of like, "Yeah, thanks." I mean, that's how I read it. But I mean, that's interesting too, right? Assuming that he kills the boar, then it leaves him with it. Like, why?
Yeah. Then you can easily see why he kind of keeps it a little bit quieter, because then he uses it. In my mind, he used it much more as like a provider to him, at least. For him, at least.
Yeah.
He spared it. Not the thing itself, but the island.
Yeah.
Gave him his legs back.
Island gave him his legs back, and then if we're reading that right, the monster not only doesn't kill him, but leaves him the thing that he was trying to get him. Oh, what about what Rose said about her husband?
In the tail.
Yeah, what did you think about that? Yeah, if you thought.
Yeah. I mean, because I know last week I brought up how my assumption is they're going to run into another faction at some point. In my mind, at least, just by the nature of storytelling, there has to be an escalation at some point.
Sure.
And there's only so much you can do in a limited location other than introduce new elements. And so in my mind, it's like, is that planting the seed that, when I talk about other factions, is the other faction going to be the people on the tail, from the tail?
I think that's everything I have in my notes. I mean, but like, I'm trying to think of stuff we talked about last week that would follow up on.
This was interesting for me because this was the first episode of Lost I ever saw, not tonight, when the show was originally airing, and so I was coming in when I saw it the first time, I was really easy to track the flashback story and how that related, but I didn't know who any of all these people were.
Yeah.
And I think most of that just went over my head at the time, and obviously I'd gone back and I'd watched the show again and seen it. But it was still the case of I knew the flashback story really well, and obviously how it ends. I couldn't have told you before tonight anything that happened on Island, which episode it was in. I remember like the funeral scene and and Locke looking up and seeing the monsters. One of the big like Jurassic Park images of the show. One of many Jurassic Park images. But I could not have pointed to those for this episode. I feel like a lot of what is on the island felt like groundwork laying. It was like seeing characters meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know the first time watching it how the show worked. When we go to that first flashback, because I hadn't seen it before, I'm like, are we going forward in time? Is is this another guy? Is this some kind of fantasy sequence? You know, are we cutting away, you know, to another location? Like there's some people off the island somewhere that now we're seeing their side of the story. Eventually you figure it out through the course of the episode, but even that, I had no grounding for at that point, because that was, you know, this heavy use of flashbacks was not a common thing in television at the time, especially in the shows I was watching. Yeah. The other thing I noticed is we're getting a lot of backstory, more than I remember, of that is not in flashbacks. We find out Jack is a doctor because of his family. We get a lot of account of the Michael and Walt story already told.
Yeah. Like, you know, his reason for being in Australia.
For a show that has a reputation of just withholding things. We're actually finding out quite a lot fairly early.
I think that was something you were saying earlier that I was going to say too.
It's just kind of spelled out. It's not.
I think
ignore.
Well, and I think you were the one that expressed that concern last week. That it's just like, okay, are we just going to keep withholding information? And it seems like it's just going to be one character at a time. Each episode is going to focus on a character. Which, yes, each episode is going to focus on a character, but at the same time, like, you are still learning. Especially these are the days when they're still trying to establish everybody. You are getting to know everybody else at the same time. Like, even though this episode was about Locke, you got to know more about all these other people. Okay, so I guess just to wrap it up, is there anything else in that episode not that we haven't already talked about? Like maybe a little thing that you're like, oh, I think this might go this direction, or maybe this is setting this up.
Not especially. I feel like this was meant for a very specific reason. That was to highlight Locke. Yeah. And kind of set him up for what his eventual path is going to be. Because whereas Kate was like, oh, I was a fugitive, but it's okay, it's fine. Like, we're not gonna. Or at least by then he's like, you're a fugitive. I don't want to know what happened. Whereas Locke is like, all right, we know his backstory and like what his what he was supposed to be doing, what his like I said, like his delusions of grandeur before the crash were.
Yeah.
And then it feels like getting to know him hit a little differently, because it does feel like it will be affecting the plot much more going forward.
Yeah, so it's funny because that was the other thing I was thinking too, is like what Lucas was saying, or what you guys were debating. Like Lucas thinks that. So it seems specifically from the first three episodes, like they're setting him up like a potential villain. Lucas thinks that's a red herring. This does not clarify that. I think you would presumably still think the same thing. You could still see, knowing what you now know, how that could turn into him becoming a villain.
And it's like if he does end up turning heel, it's much more understandable.
Yeah.
Given this episode, you can start connecting the dots of especially if it's that whole route of it's more of a religious thing for him.
Yeah. But no, so he came cosplayed as Locke today.
I noticed. Is the scar still there? I know it was fading off.
Oh no.
I'll put it back. I'll put it back on when we do a picture.
Yeah, it was there when you got here a little bit. We should have more people again next week. Everybody that texted me about missing today said they're going to watch the next episode and they plan on being here next week. So that's true.
So I'm reading your screen. I think Kate was just joking about being vegetarian.
Oh, we covered that real quick. That was the one thing I was like, we don't have to talk about that. So
I think she was just joking.
People refer to that as a plot hole. Kate saying she's a vegetarian. Did that strike me as a plot hole?
Not yet, because I haven't really seen them eat anything.
Yeah, we're probably good with the last week.
Or did they eat something?
Yeah. So in her flashback last week, when the farmer finds her, she's eating eggs and bacon. Yeah. So that's referred to as a plot hole, and part of what I like to do with this podcast is point to things people.
That was Annie though. Annie eats eggs. Kate doesn't eat.
Yeah. She has multiple personalities. That flashback was months before, because she spent months on the farm. So she may have become a vegetarian while working on the farm and getting attached to animals and shit. The other thing is,
then she goes on a hunt. So she's probably
right.
But she was going on the hunt to do the thingamajig.
And because the other people need to eat to survive, and there aren't a lot of options. So, but yes, I think another legitimate way to read that is she's joking around with Jack. I don't think that's a cop-out to say that was a joke. There's literally other explanations besides, they forgot that she...
You can't believe people on the internet didn't get a joke.
Yeah. But all right, next week. I would now like to give a special thank you to the currently active donors. These include candidate number 90, Ben Ward, candidate number 108, Jeffrey Winslow, candidate number 69, Brian Phillips, candidate number 32, Chuck Boyd, and candidate number 341, Hans. If you too would like to become a candidate, you can do so for as little as $1. One-time or recurring donations can be set up on Ko-fi.com/candlepun or patreon.com/candlepun. A donation of any amount will get you credited in this podcast and added to the candidate wall, which will be displayed in all video versions of the episodes of this podcast from that point forward, even once you're no longer donating. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources that are used in the production of this podcast. These include Mary Mullins, Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, William McMahon, and Charlene McMahon. Until next time, namaste and good luck. Okay, fuck me. All right. To like this video, click the thumbs up. Or, if there has been an incursion by the hostiles, click the thumbs down. To leave feedback, enter a comment below. To be notified when more videos arrive, click the circle and then select the notification bell. To view previous content from this channel, click either of the two boxes.